to start off our conversation about accessories, their worthiness, what they're good for and what they're not good for, I'm going to go right in with accessory number one. When most people buy a Touratech catalog, maybe not a Touratech catalog so much these days, but when most people turn up with an adventure bike, and easily one of the most common questions I get on any setup video, any riding position video, you will find a question about bar risers. So I also think, Dad, you are the king of bar riser opinions. If anyone's ever made the mistake on the off-road school of asking Dad to have bar risers on their bike, over to you.
Are you setting me up to be the bad guy right from the start here?
Well, with bar risers, yeah.
Unbelievable. So I'm out, guys. It's been nice talking to you. I'll be off now.
I'm also going to put my phone on silent before I forget. Yeah.
Okay.
Bar risers.
So bar risers, yeah, they are a subject that I do have an opinion on, and I think the thing is that people always sort of just grab a set of bar risers, and as the first time they stand up on a motorbike and it feels a little bit awkward, their solution is to read the internet and then fix it by putting bar risers on. And for me, I think it's really, really important that you don't then stop yourself from improving as a rider by ending up in a bad riding position. So there is a place for bar risers, but the challenge is to first work out what your problem is, or your difficulty is, and kind of learn to improve your body movement on the bike and improve your body position on the bike first, so that you understand the reason you're then choosing to put bar risers on or not. And I have been through this process with quite a few tall people before, and when we're talking tall, we're definitely talking 6'2" up, I think.
187, 190, 193 people in that sort of category.
Yeah, and even with a person that tall, I've explained this logic to them, and we've made sure the handlebars are in the correct position first, which is always super important. And there is definitely a correct position for handlebars where they you can see that in one of your videos without a doubt. And, I think if you go that is something, if you go across the internet and talk to any experienced professional, semi-professional rider, then the handlebar position is, that is a thing where the ends of the bars are level. First of all is to get that right, and then to go through the detailed good standing position, a good body movement, and give it time, and then get comfortable with those things before we start changing the cockpit dramatically, and never then being able to get our standing position right because the cockpit's wrong. And with handlebar risers, the danger always is that you're kind of just moving the contact points, the critical contact points on the bike, to the wrong place, so the bike doesn't handle as it was designed to handle anymore.
Well, I think one of the things we've noticed as well a lot, especially I've started to kind of pick up on this recently, and maybe in this position I'm guilty of that thing that, like, they say doctors get, where they learn about a new illness in med school, and then the next week every single patient they have gets tested for that illness, and I've only just figured this out. But when you move the handlebars from that quite neutral position where they're flat and you're in a standing position, the way you interact with the handlebars when you move them and you move your hands and so on changes. And essentially what happens is, when you're stood up well, this is my idea with it anyway, is that your riding position should mean that when you want to change direction and you're stood up, if you use the handlebars to do that, you push down on them. But if you change the handlebar position by putting bar risers on them or so on, you change the interaction you have with the bike and the subsequent effect it has over the handling. And essentially, you turn it into more of a counter-steering action, which is a much more aggressive, rough action. And it just doesn't work as well. I think we've seen that both through the school, but also in my own riding on my own dirt bike. I've got handlebars on there that are, at the moment, I bent the original ones when I had an enormous crash, and I just grabbed a set that you had in the workshop. I didn't tell you this. I stole some handlebars from your workshop. I just grabbed a set that were lying around, and they were Magura MX2s. It turns out that handlebar is really tall and really wide, which for me is nice. I'm tall. But the subsequent consequence of that is that when I was riding an enduro bike, they were too tall, and my interaction with the handlebars wasn't good. And it meant that especially when I was sitting down or when I was in a really like attack position, it's actually a little bit hard to ride because my movements are oversensitive. Like when I touch the handlebar in a corner, it's really aggressive, even though I'm only touching it a tiny bit, and it's causing the front to fold. And I think if you're doing that, even when you change from a small handlebar to a big handlebar, which is a rise of
a few mil,
at most 10 mil, like what's the lowest handlebar rise to the biggest handlebar rise difference on a dirt bike? You're talking like maybe a 55 to a 70 or something, which is less than most bar risers, and it really messes with the handling. And that's even when the handlebars are still in a good position. When you go to a bar riser, the handlebars automatically come closer, which changes changes the geometry of the bike essentially, because they're in a different position, and so your interaction with it just becomes dramatically different really, really quickly. And I think that is one of the things that is most underestimated. Like bar risers are always a quick fix, but the way I kind of think about them is that maybe they should be used as like a cheap solution to discover whether that is a good direction to go. So if you try bar risers and you're like, this is better, actually what you should then do is sell the bar risers on eBay and go and buy a set of handlebars that are taller.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. There's some logic to that for sure. But I think, yeah, the issue I always have with people putting bar risers on is it's not a thought out process. It's just like, here's a thing in the catalog. Oh, I put them on, I stand up, I'm more comfortable standing. And it's a short-term Band-Aid fix to a problem that's then very limiting and limits your progress as a as a rider. And that's what I want to see people do. Is I want people make that decision to change their handlebars or put bar risers on based on helping them to improve their riding, and that way round, where you're fairly new to off-road and you're not comfortable standing, so you put a handlebar riser on to make it more comfortable standing. That's what I say. For me, that's limiting. It stops your progress a little bit further down the line in your learning journey. You've got to work out how to stand well first and to be balanced on the bike first. That's why when we do the school, we spend a lot of time getting people to ride around one-handed and no-handed, because the good standing position doesn't come from the handlebars. The handlebars are a place to put your hands to use the controls. So you need to fix that other problem first, and we're all always learning in this stuff as well. Like I don't profess to know it all about it, but a great example for me is my personal journey is fairly recently I've started using a tall seat on all my bikes, and I'm not really tall enough to deal with for a tall seat to be comfortable when I'm stopped. But it's much more comfortable for me to ride with. So I'm kind of having to be a little bit better again. I'm already not bad at it, but a little bit better again, get better at being able to get my foot on the ground when I'm in an awkward situation, because it's helping my riding, having that little bit taller seat, because it's easier for me to transition from sitting to standing a little bit because I've got an old injury. But sometimes I've seen that scenario with your tall rider as well, where it's much easier or much better for the handling of the bike and for them to continue to improve, to change, to work out that they don't need bar risers. The bar risers are actually great. They're, the standard handlebars are in a great position for the handling of the bike. So actually, let's move the seat or let's move the foot pegs,
Or
take the foot pegs a little bit lower, for example.
I think that's like a really holistic conversation when you're talking about bike setup as well, because when you move foot pegs, you also encounter the same problem. Like in the V-Strom
Yes.
project bike we had, I deliberately moved the foot pegs backwards and lower to change the moment to give me more control, because essentially when the foot pegs were too high, I didn't have enough leverage over that bike left and right. So when I
Yeah,
tried
but
to make it steer, it didn't turn. So if you lower the foot
that
pegs, you change that as well. Do you know?
and that's it. Well, that's exactly my point. Really, is let's not change the bar risers as the first thing you do on a bike before you've even ridden it, or the first thing when you are finding riding off road a little bit nervous and a little bit awkward, and you stand up and it feels awkward. So change the handlebars at that moment. Like that's the wrong way around for me. You've been riding for however long, and you've got your own skill set and your own limits on your own skill set, and you kind of know what they are. And so then you're changing something and you're sort of seeing, oh, well, that's what that changed. I like it or I don't like it. And I'm totally okay with that. If someone's already sort of, we've had quite a few times where we've got our friends from Sweden that come over, and they're all at least 7'3". But they're all already, they've already got to the point where they're like level 3 plus riders. And now when they come to me and go, hey, I'd like a set of bar risers, or, and again, they're all really tall, and some of them want bar risers and some of them don't, but they've got to the point where they've worked out for themselves, what their riding position is and what's holding them back in their riding, and they're making that choice based on that, not, oh, I'm not happy standing up, so I'm going to put a set of bar risers on. Like, we've had people turn up and it's like their second time off road, and they're 5'8" and they've got bar risers on their bikes. And to me, that's not a decision that you've made by yourself. That's a decision that the internet's made for you.
So do you in that same conversation of bar risers, not all bar risers are made equal.
Of course.
And you have that Rox riser style bar riser where you can rotate the handlebars forwards or backwards. And obviously some people, in their conversation of their riding, and we're talking about this.
Sorry guys, I need coffee.
That's all right. What are you doing?
He hasn't
pouring milk at the...
Yeah, because I bought the whole flask of coffee with me, see? So I've got... I need a lot of coffee to get through these kind of conversations this early in the morning.
One of us...
Yes, I told you this. He's making me do this podcast at 4:30 a.m.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's winter. Look how light my scene is. No one's believing it. It's nearly the middle of the day.
Yeah, hey, like with the whole aftermarket, again, there's products that are better than others. There's products that are more expensive than others, and those two things don't necessarily equate. And again, that's sort of my point, really, is like, if you're at the point where you understand yourself and you're riding well enough that you're thinking, oh, I could actually do with the bars a little bit higher, a little bit different position, then you've got that opportunity to go out to the internet and buy the bar riser that is just a 10 mil spacer and, is correspondingly relatively cheap. And but it has its downsides because it doesn't look as cool. It's a cheaper looking product and it moves the handlebars up and backwards, So the Rox one's a great example, a different product for sure, a little bit more expensive. Great advantage in that it not only comes up, but then you can also rotate the base of the handlebar forwards and backwards. And all these products always have a plus and minus, and that's a real plus for those with me that they roll forwards. But the minus is that then that's it's a minimum height that you have to go up with those Rox ones because they're effectively making two sets of clamps. There's no Rox one that just goes up just a little bit. It always goes up substantially.
Yeah, they're like
it goes forward.
They're like 30 mil at least, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean that would definitely be too much for me. I'm definitely quite sensitive to that. Like you say, there are dirt bikes who change the bend of the bars and.
They're 2 inches. Now, I don't speak inches. I'm sure one of our many Patreon, but what's that, like 54?
50 mil.
50 mil. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Exactly.
So,
and
we're talking about this conversation. I have just pulled up, I don't know how to share this. I'll probably put this in afterwards. I've just jumped on the Rox Riser website to have a look at how big their risers are.
But hey, like you said, there's also I think the much missed point, and of course, it's an expensive way to do it. It's an expensive experiment. But, there are lots of different handlebar bends out there. And, you had some for the V-Strom as well with the flex bars as well. There's a lot of different ways you can go with trying to change that cockpit. But like when you make any change to something that affects the handling of the bike, we'll always argue that you want to make small incremental changes with that. And sometimes that's difficult when you're buying parts, aftermarket parts, because it can be an expensive change that takes you in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it can. And at the end of the day with adventure bikes, we're not talking about it like we're trying to win a national championship in enduro. You're just trying to get it relatively in the ballpark, right? So
yeah, you're trying to be comfortable, aren't you? So you enjoy your ride.
So do you think there's a place for things like bar risers? And I think this leads into one of our other podcast notes points of using a bar riser to get comfortable, so that once you're comfortable, you can start to figure out the other things. Or do you think that is not not a good way to go?
No, I think that stops you improve. You then get fixed in that body position. We've seen it many, many times, haven't we, where people don't quite work out the good body position early in their riding, and then they become quite good riders with an awkward body position, but it always becomes the limit of them learning the next thing quickly. Then it can take much longer to work out the next progression in the skill when you don't sort those core movements and core body positions out early in your riding. And that's why I really get sort of strong on let's not whack the bar risers on until we understand a few other things. And if you understand these things and you feel it and you get it, and and then you decide you want handlebars, the boots falls in the same category. We have this conversation at the start of every off-road school.
Careful.
No, I know, but I'm not going to go deep into boots here. But it's the same conversation. If someone wants to wear a set of trainers to go adventure riding, and there's someone that's been adventure riding for 30 years, and they're making that choice because they're happy with it and they're experienced and they're making that decision from a position of knowledge and understanding, I'm totally fine with that. Like, we all take our own choices with that stuff. But at the start of your journey, you kind of need to learn from other, the majority of other people's experience and skill set. Like that's the point of going on the internet and scouring around and reading all these different forums and views and everything, is to garner some information and make choices to sort of shorten that learning journey. Otherwise, you go back to Gwyn and my day when we learned to ride by, there was no choice but getting on a bike and crashing into a brick wall, because there wasn't.
The consequences were high.
Yeah.
That fantastic conversation you've just been watching was part of the Brake Magazine Secret Podcast series. That's a series for our Patreon members only. If you want to see the full thing or listen to the full thing, come and check out our Patreon page on the link in the description.